I'd always dreamed of escaping to the wilderness, living off the land, away from the chaos of modern life. When the opportunity finally came, I jumped at it. I bought a piece of land deep in the mountains, far from any town or neighbor, and decided to go completely off-grid. I built my own cabin from scratch, installed solar panels, and set up a rainwater collection system. I was ready for the simple life, away from all the distractions. The first few months were everything I had hoped for. I hunted and fished for my food, grew my own vegetables, and spent my days exploring the forest. It was peaceful, just me and nature. I felt like I was truly living for the first time in my life. But then, as winter approached, things started to change. The weather turned harsh, the nights grew longer and colder, and a strange, uneasy feeling began to settle over the land. It started with small things. At first, I noticed that my food supplies seemed to be dwindling faster than they should have. I chalked it up to a mistake on my part, maybe a miscalculation in my inventory. But then I began hearing strange noises at night, rustling in the woods, footsteps crunching in the snow just outside my cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed outside, but I'd never see anything. Just the wind howling through the trees and the snow falling quietly to the ground. Then came the animal tracks. I woke up one morning to find a series of footprints leading up to my front door. At first, I thought it was a bear, but the prints were too small, too human-like. They were erratic, circling my cabin, stopping just at the edge of the tree line. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone or something was out there, lurking in the shadows. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was just my imagination, maybe a trick of the light or the isolation getting to me. But then I found the claw marks, deep, jagged gouges carved into the wood of my cabin door, like something had tried to get in. I reinforced the door and windows, set up makeshift alarms using tin cans and string, anything to give me a heads up if something or someone tried to break in. One night, I woke up to the sound of my alarms going off. The rattling of cans sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I grabbed my rifle and crept to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, in the dim light of the moon, I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the tree line. It was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally long, and it seemed to be staring right at me. I froze, unsure of what to do. My instincts told me to stay inside, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly opened the door, rifle in hand, and stepped out onto the porch. The figure didn't move. It just stood there watching. I called out, demanding to know who it was and what they wanted, but there was no response, just silence, except for the crunching of snow under my boots as I cautiously approached. When I was about 20 feet away, the figure finally moved. It turned and vanished into the woods with an unsettling speed, like it was gliding over the snow. I chased after it, my breath coming out in frantic puffs of steam. I lost sight of it quickly, but I could still hear it. Branches snapping, snow crunching, always just ahead, just out of reach. I kept running, deeper into the woods, my fear giving way to frustration and anger. I had come out here to escape, to find peace, and now this thing was invading my sanctuary. I was determined to find out what it was, to confront it. But then I tripped on something buried beneath the snow and fell hard, my rifle slipping from my grasp. As I struggled to get up, I realized what I had tripped over, a small, leather-bound journal, half buried in the snow. I picked it up, dusted off the snow, and opened it. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with handwritten notes and sketches of strange symbols. I didn't have time to examine it closely before I heard the sound again, the crunching footsteps, coming closer now. I grabbed my rifle and backed up against a tree, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the figure standing just a few feet away, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. I raised my rifle and shouted at it to stay back, but it didn't move. It just stood there, watching me with those eerie, glowing eyes. My hands were shaking, my finger hovering over the trigger. I didn't want to shoot, didn't want to risk hitting whatever or whoever it was. But then it took a step toward me, and instinct took over. I fired a shot into the air, the sound echoing through the trees. The figure flinched but didn't run. Instead, it let out a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I fired again, this time aiming at its feet, hoping to scare it off, but it didn't budge. It just stood there, its eyes fixed on me, its growl growing louder and more menacing. I realized then that whatever this thing was, it wasn't afraid of me. It wasn't going to run. I slowly started backing away, keeping my rifle trained on it, never taking my eyes off it. And then, without warning, it lunged at me. I barely had time to react. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet and falling to the ground. The figure loomed over me, its eyes glowing brighter, its growl filling my ears. I scrambled to my feet and fired another shot, but it went wide, missing the figure entirely. I turned and ran, my heart racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running until I reached my cabin. I slammed the door shut and bolted it, my hands shaking. I could hear the figure outside, moving around the cabin, its footsteps crunching in the snow. I backed away from the door, my rifle still in hand, and waited. Hours passed, but the figure never tried to break in. It just circled the cabin, its footsteps never stopping, never slowing. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, listening, waiting, hoping it would go away, but it didn't. It stayed until dawn, and then, just as the sun began to rise, the footsteps stopped. I waited a few more minutes before cautiously opening the door. The figure was gone, but I could still feel its presence, like it was watching me from the shadows. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. I needed to leave, to get as far away from this place as possible. I packed up what little I could carry and set off down the mountain, my eyes constantly scanning the woods for any sign of movement. The journey back to civilization was long and treacherous, but I didn't stop, didn't rest. I just kept moving, driven by the fear that whatever was in those woods was still following me. When I finally reached the nearest town, I went straight to the police station. I tried to explain what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said I was probably just seeing things, that it was the isolation and the cold getting to me. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. I left the journal with the police, hoping they would find some answers in its pages. But I never went back to that cabin, never returned to those woods. I sold the land and moved back to the city, back to the noise and the chaos. It wasn't the life I had wanted, but at least it was safe. At least I wasn't alone.